From the very beginning, Katy had always been a woman who fit the mold of what society deemed ideal. Born in a small town where everyone knew each other, she stood out for her natural beauty. From her youth, her golden blonde hair and emerald green eyes, deep like a forest at dawn, turned heads wherever she went. She was the girl mothers pointed to as an example, and the one men admired silently. But what few knew was that beneath that perfect image lay a young woman trapped by others' expectations and her own unspoken desires. Katy grew up in a traditional household. Her mother, a strict and controlling woman, constantly reminded her that a good woman should be modest, obedient, and above all, discreet. Her father, though affectionate, remained somewhat distant, leaving her mother to set the rules of the home. From a young age, Katy learned to suppress her feelings and bury the questions that swirled in her mind. On the outside, she was the perfect daughter, but inside, her heart was filled with longings she dared not explore. During her teenage years, Katy began to realize her natural magnetism. She wasn't just beautiful. There was something about her presence that drew people in. The way she walked, the way she looked, the way she smiled, everything seemed designed to capture attention. Yet this allure made her feel misunderstood. Boys admired her from a distance, while girls observed her with a mix of envy and admiration. But no one took the time to truly know her, to see beyond the surface. Katy dreamed of something more: adventures, discoveries, freedom. But in her small world, those dreams felt like little more than illusions. At the age of 20, she met the man who would become her husband. He was older, stable, and secure, with an organized life that seemed to promise everything her mother had ever dreamed of for her. At first, Katy was drawn to the idea of stability. He was charming, kind, and seemed to have everything under control. In the blink of an eye, she went from being a young woman with vague dreams to becoming the perfect wife. The wedding was like a fairy tale, filled with flowers, lights, and promises. But for Katy, it was also the beginning of a life that would trap her in a gilded cage. The first years of marriage were good, or so it seemed. They had a beautiful home, financial stability, and a routine many envied. Katy fulfilled her role as the impeccable wife, always polished, always kind. But over time, she began to notice something she couldn't ignore: a growing emptiness inside her. Her husband was a good man, but he lacked passion. Their days became a succession of predictable events, devoid of excitement, devoid of spark. The nights were silent, and intimacy became more of an obligation than a desire. As the years passed, that emptiness deepened. Katy began to feel as though she didn't truly know who she was. In the mirror, she saw a beautiful woman, but one who was lifeless. The layers of makeup, the elegant dresses, all of it seemed part of a disguise crafted to hide her true essence. Sometimes, in the solitude of night, she allowed herself to dream of another life. Exotic places, adventures filled with passion, and an inner fire she hadn't felt in years. But every morning, those dreams were pushed aside as she continued with her routine. Everything changed one ordinary afternoon. Katy was sitting in a meeting room, signing the divorce papers. There were no fights, no drama, just a quiet agreement between two people who knew their story had ended long ago. As she signed, she felt a mixture of relief and fear. For the first time in years, she was alone. Alone to decide, to fail, to discover herself. When she left that office, something inside her shifted. It wasn't immediate, but the seed of a new Katy had begun to take root. That night, standing before the mirror in her bathroom, Katy looked at herself as she hadn't in years. Her golden hair fell in soft waves, and her emerald green eyes sparkled with an intensity she didn't recognize. There was something new in her gaze, something that intrigued her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to ask, "What do I want?" And while she didn't yet have the answer, the question was enough. It was the first step toward something greater. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Katy began making decisions she had never allowed herself before. She changed the way she dressed, opting for clothes that reflected her bolder side. She went out alone to places she had never dared to visit. She allowed herself to be seen, admired, desired. And with every step she took, she felt as though she was reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost long ago. Katy was no longer the same woman she had been during her marriage. Now, she was someone who valued her freedom above all else. Someone who understood that life was full of risks, but that those risks were necessary to truly feel alive. Each experience she lived, each person she met, transformed her. Katy wasn't searching for love. She was searching for discovery. She wasn't seeking approval. She was seeking authenticity. On this journey, Katy would discover that desire is not just physical, but also emotional and spiritual. She would explore the boundaries of her sensuality, confront her deepest fears, and immerse herself in a world of pleasure, danger, and self-awareness. Her story is not just about a woman breaking free from the chains of her past. It is about someone learning to embrace her inner fire, the fire that had always been there, but that she had never allowed herself to feel. Katy in Flames is not merely a tale of passion. It is a journey into the unknown, where every decision, every encounter, and every experience brings her closer to her true essence. Because deep down, Katy had always known she was destined for something greater, something that burned with the intensity of her own desire.